A young female mechanic fixes a billionaire's jet on a cold morning airstrip, with nothing but worn tools and quiet determination. But what happened next? The billionaire, haunted by years of isolation and power without purpose, stepped forward and gave her something no one saw coming, a chance to change both their lives. This moving story of how a humble mechanic fixes a billionaire's jet and finds something far more valuable than money will stay with you long after it ends. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. People scoffed when a battered Jeep came to a grinding halt near runway 3 at Glenridge Regional Airfield. From the driver's seat stepped out a woman with a worn leather jacket, hair tied back, and hands already stained with grease. Her name was Amelia Brooks, 29 years old, a backcountry mechanic with no official badges, just a legacy of grit and skill passed down through generations. She'd been summoned at 6:12, no explanation, just a message: jet failure, immediate assistance, generous compensation. Most would have ignored it, but not Amelia. As she walked across the chilly tarmac, the wind biting through her denim, corporate eyes watched from behind tinted glass men in tailored coats, sipping lattes, whispering dismissively. To them, she didn't belong here. But in a corner of the lounge, someone else was watching silently. Benjamin Hartley, owner of the grounded jet, a reclusive millionaire businessman and a legend in his own right. What happened next wasn't just about mechanics or engines. It would unravel decades of assumptions, shake a dynasty, and rewrite the way Benjamin and the world saw people like Amelia. And in less than 15 minutes, one act of silent courage would lead to a reward so personal, it would leave Amelia in tears. The wind cut through the open runway like a blade, but Amelia Brooks barely noticed. Her eyes were locked on the silver jet that gleamed like a polished dagger beneath the gray morning light. She dropped her bag near the engine hatch, knelt down, and flipped the panel open. Within seconds, her heart stopped. The fuel line wasn't just damaged, it was a death trap. It had melted, warped beyond recognition. The insulation was gone. The clamps had turned green with corrosion, and worst of all, the leak had nearly reached the ignition coil. Amelia exhaled, slow and steady, the way her father once taught her when they fixed a crop duster in the middle of a thunderstorm. No panic, just the work. Inside the lounge, Benjamin Hartley stood behind the tinted glass, arms folded, watching intently. He'd heard the diagnosis from his chief technician: engine compromised, unsafe to fly. Days of delay. But now, seeing this young woman with a weathered wrench and fire in her eyes, something shifted. Amelia didn't wait for permission. She started working. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who had spent more nights under engines than under a roof. She ripped out the ruined line, jury-rigged a bypass with a spare clamp from her tool roll, sealed it with epoxy, then reinforced the connection with aircraft-grade tape. She reached for her soldering iron, hers, not the airport's connected to a car battery she dragged from the Jeep. Sparks flew, smoke hissed. The jet didn't flinch. Minutes passed. Then, whirr, a low vibration began humming through the aircraft's frame. Inside the terminal, someone gasped. Benjamin's staff leaned toward the window, their laughter long gone. One of the engineers whispered, "That should have taken 5 hours." Outside, Amelia tightened the final bolt and wiped her hands on her flannel. No celebration, no nod of pride, just muscle memory. She reached for her bag. That's when the jet door opened. Metal stairs hissed downward, clanking against the concrete. A figure emerged. Tailored navy coat, hair neatly styled, boots that cost more than her truck, but the look in his eyes wasn't judgment. It was awe. Benjamin Hartley descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. Amelia froze, unsure if she was about to be thanked or arrested. "You fixed it," he said. She nodded. "Yes, sir." He stepped closer. "No, you saved it." Amelia shrugged, trying to play it off. "Your fuel line was a few inches away from sparking against the coil. I just didn't want to watch something explode before breakfast." Benjamin chuckled genuinely. "My lead mechanic missed that. Said it needed to be grounded for a week. You found it in minutes." Amelia didn't respond. She didn't need to. The engine was humming like it had never been broken. Benjamin looked at her again. Really looked. "You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you." "I don't walk away from fire hazards," she said. He stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. It wasn't the smile of a billionaire sealing a deal. It was something quieter. Real. "Do you even know who I am?" he asked. "Benjamin Hartley," she said, almost too casually. "I read about you once in Forbes. Skimmed it. And you're not impressed. I'm not here to be impressed. I'm here to fix problems." For a beat, he didn't say anything. Then he turned around and waved to his team through the window. Inside. "All of you." No one argued. The doors clicked shut. Now it was just the two of them on the open tarmac. "I've been surrounded by experts my whole life," he said. "Voice lower now. Men with titles and credentials. You're the first one who didn't talk. You just did." Amelia slung her bag over her shoulder. "Like I said, I fix things." Benjamin took a step closer. "What would you do?" he asked softly. "If someone like me asked you something insane?" She raised an eyebrow. How insane? "What if I asked you to come with me?" Amelia stared at him. The cold didn't seem to matter anymore. The jet, the money, the onlookers. None of it mattered. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just said, "That depends on where we're going." The silence after her answer was thicker than the morning fog. Benjamin Hartley didn't blink, didn't smile. He simply studied her like she was the only puzzle he'd never been able to solve. Then, without warning, he said, "Take a walk with me." Amelia hesitated. Not because she was nervous, but because it felt loaded. Men like him didn't just ask, they commanded. But this felt different, like he was offering her something without quite knowing what it was. She adjusted the strap on her bag and nodded. "All right." They walked past the humming jet, past the glass terminal still buzzing with silent eyes. She expected him to ask about her tools, her background, maybe even how she learned to fix a plane that was declared unsalvageable. But he didn't. Instead, he asked, "What made you stay?" She paused. "You mean, stay and fix it?" He nodded. She looked up at the soft sky, now turning gold with the first stretch of sunrise. "Because walking away would have haunted me more than the risk of staying." That stopped him cold. "I've never met anyone like you," he said quietly. "I get that a lot. Usually right before people ask me to leave," she said with a small, tired smile. He let out a breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. Well, not today. They rounded a corner, approaching a small, forgotten hangar at the edge of the field, the kind of place most people overlook. Rusted, dented, probably condemned. But Amelia's eyes lit up. She had a thing for places like this. Benjamin pulled out a key from his coat pocket. "This belonged to my father. No one's been inside since he passed." He pushed open the door with a groan of metal. Dust danced in the sunlight pouring through the skylights. The air smelled like time. Inside were two folding chairs, a dusty old toolbox, a wall of faded photographs, planes, airfields. And in the center, a black and white photo of a man standing beside a boy with a wild smile. Benjamin pointed. That's me. I was 8. He taught me how to rebuild an entire carburetor before I could ride a bike. Amelia stepped closer, her voice softer now. He looks proud. He was, Benjamin said, quieter now. But somewhere along the way, I stopped fixing things with my hands and started fixing them with checks. Somewhere, I lost this. He looked around like the room was a memory he had abandoned. Amelia glanced at the photo again. You didn't lose it. You just left it here. He turned to her, and something in his face shifted. Not admiration, not gratitude. Something more vulnerable. Something that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man who hadn't exhaled in years. What if I told you, he said slowly, that watching you out there today reminded me of who I used to be? She looked up at him. Then I'd say, maybe it's time you picked up a wrench again. That's when he did something completely unexpected. He took off his watch. Not just any watch, an engraved, custom piece probably worth more than her Jeep 10 times over, and placed it gently on the table. I've spent years rewarding people with things like this, he said, but none of it ever meant anything. He looked at her, his eyes glassy but steady. This does. He reached into his coat, pulled out a folded slip of paper, and handed it to her. Amelia hesitated, then opened it. It was a fully paid certificate of ownership. For the entire hangar. Her breath caught. What is this? This place should belong to someone who remembers what it's like to care, he said. To someone who sees more than just profit in broken metal. I can't take this, she whispered, shaking her head. You don't even know me. Benjamin smiled. The first full, genuine smile she'd seen on his face. That's exactly why I'm giving it to you. Her eyes burned, not from wind, not from cold, but from the kind of raw, unexpected emotion that snuck up on you like an old song. She looked down at the paper again, then back at the man who, just minutes ago, had been another powerful stranger behind glass. Now he was something else entirely. Amelia didn't speak for a long time. She stood there, her fingers still holding the deed to the hangar, her eyes locked on the space around her, the cracked floor, the dusty beams, the smell of oil and stories that had long settled into the walls. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a visitor. She felt home. I've never had anything like this, she murmured. Benjamin stood beside her, hands in his pockets, looking not at the building but at her. You earned it, he said simply. But Amelia shook her head. No, you don't get it. People like me, we don't get handed keys. We get handed invoices, dead ends, doors slammed in our faces. Benjamin's jaw tightened. Then maybe it's time someone changed that. She turned to him, a cautious softness in her voice. Why me? Why now? He looked down, took a deep breath, and let out something that sounded almost like confession. Because when I saw you kneeling under that jet ignoring the stairs, the suits, the whispers I saw someone I used to be, before I built the towers, before the boardrooms and the private chefs and the Benjamin Hartley brand, I used to fix things too, with my hands, with my dad. He gestured to the wall of old photos. But I forgot. I let it go. I traded what was real for what looked impressive on paper. Amelia watched him carefully. He wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was remembering. He continued. I've spent years surrounded by people who nod when they should challenge me, who chase the title, not the truth. But today, I watched a woman in a torn jacket fix a jet with nothing but instinct and integrity, while everyone else watched like it was a circus act. There was something raw in his voice now. You didn't just fix my engine, he said. You cracked something open I didn't realize was even broken. For a long moment, there was silence. Then Amelia took a slow breath and said quietly, "You know, I didn't come here for a breakthrough. I came here for a paycheck. I know, but I think I found something better." He looked at her. "And what's that?" She smiled, faint but honest. "Someone who finally saw me." It hit him harder than he expected. Because for all the awards, all the fame, all the noise, Benjamin Hartley had never been seen either. "Not like this." They sat down on the edge of the old hangar platform, legs dangling, silence stretching between them like an unspoken agreement. For a while, they didn't talk. They just watched the sun climb the edge of the sky and let the moment breathe. Amelia ran her fingers over the edge of the deed again, still half in disbelief. Then she asked, "What will people say when they find out?" Benjamin didn't miss a beat. "Let them talk. They'll say I manipulated you, that I fixed an engine and stole your heart. They'll say what they want. But I know the truth." She glanced sideways at him. "And what's that?" He looked at her fully, openly, and replied, "That I've never admired anyone more in my life." Amelia's eyes dropped for a second, as if unsure what to do with the weight of that kind of respect. Then she said something she hadn't said in years. "Thank you. Not for the hangar, not for the praise, but for the shift." For the first time, someone had seen her not as a tool, not as a novelty, but as enough just as she was. And that realization was heavier than any gift she could have carried. The next morning, the sky above Glen Ridge shimmered in soft peach and lavender. It was the kind of morning that whispered of second chances. Inside the hangar, Amelia Brooks stood barefoot on the cool concrete floor, her hair still damp from a quick rinse at the maintenance washroom. She wore an oversized hoodie, Benjamin Hartley's, judging by the fit and faint scent of cedarwood and jet fuel. In her hands was a mug of black coffee, chipped at the rim. She smiled as she sipped. It tasted like home. She turned toward the corner where Benjamin sat cross-legged on an overturned crate, sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands. In front of them, the guts of an old Cessna that hadn't flown in 2 decades. He held up a bolt and grinned. "It's rusted solid. Want to bet I can get it loose without snapping it." She raised an eyebrow. "You think you're still a mechanic?" "I was never not one," he replied with a shrug. She chuckled softly and handed him a can of lubricant. "Be my guest." They worked in companionable silence. The world outside had started spinning again, emails, headlines, investors, but here, in this quiet place of steel and stories, none of that mattered. For once, Benjamin wasn't Benjamin Hartley, the empire builder. He was just a man who remembered what it felt like to fix something with his hands, and to stand beside someone who didn't want anything from him but the truth. Mid-morning, a black SUV pulled up outside the hangar gate. Amelia noticed Benjamin stiffen slightly. Expecting someone, she asked. He sighed. "Probably Jason. My chief of operations. If anyone could track me down, it'd be him." Sure enough, moments later, Jason Hale emerged pressed suit, clipboard in hand, Bluetooth earpiece still flashing, the picture of corporate efficiency. "Sir," he said crisply, nodding at Benjamin before turning his gaze toward Amelia with barely masked confusion. "Jason," Benjamin said, wiping his hands. "We're busy." Jason blinked, clearly not sure how to process the scene his billionaire CEO on the floor, tinkering beside a woman in a hoodie, her feet covered in dust, her hands marked with oil. "Busy," Jason repeated. Benjamin gestured to the plane. "We're rebuilding something." Jason looked from the plane to Amelia, then back. "You do realize the media is on fire right now. There are rumors, headlines, questions about who she is, why you're off-grid." "Let them talk," Benjamin cut in, his tone firm but calm. "I'm right where I need to be." Jason stepped closer. "You have a press event in 2 days. Langford Industries is ready to sign the merger. Are you really going to risk that? For this. Benjamin looked him in the eye. I'm not risking anything. For the first time in years, I'm investing in something that actually matters. Jason hesitated. And what exactly is this? Amelia stood, wiping her hands. It's a hangar, a plane, a good morning, maybe even a future. Benjamin smiled, proud, unshaken. Jason stared at them both for a moment longer, then gave a tight nod. Understood. I'll reschedule the briefing. As he left, Amelia turned to Benjamin. That was a lot. He nodded. It's always a lot when you choose something the world doesn't understand. They returned to their workbench, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Benjamin asked, What if we turned this place into more than just a memory? Amelia tilted her head. A school, he said. A training ground. For mechanics like you, people with raw skill who never got a shot because no one bothered to look past the resume. She stared at him, a slow realization blooming. You're serious. I've got the space, the tools, the connections. You've got the fire, the vision, the story. Amelia looked down at her hands, dirty, steady, real. Are you offering me a job, she asked. Benjamin chuckled. I'm offering you a partnership. She blinked, stunned by the word. Not employment, not favor, but equal ground. A moment passed before she answered. Then let's build something worth keeping. And just like that, the opportunity that neither of them had planned for became the future they both wanted. Days passed, then weeks. What began as a moment an impossible engine fix and a deed to an old hangar evolved into something neither Amelia Brooks nor Benjamin Hartley had ever expected purpose. Not polished, not perfect, just real. By the third week, the hangar looked different. Not because it had been renovated, no. The rust still curled along the window frames. The roof still leaked when it rained, but because life had moved in. Tools had found homes. Coffee mugs left warm rings on workbenches. A chalkboard near the entrance now read, Learn by doing. Fail loud. Fix louder. In Amelia's handwriting. She had never imagined teaching. But now, 3 young trainees, former dropouts, high school misfits, and one single mom who once fixed her own motorcycle to survive, stood around her, eyes wide, soaking in everything she said like it mattered. Because here it did. Benjamin watched from the side. He rarely spoke during the lessons. His presence was quiet, but steady. He helped where he could, hauling parts, organizing tool shelves, handing out fresh gloves like some billionaire-turned-garage dad. One afternoon, Amelia caught him staring not at her, but at the students. You okay? She asked, handing him a wrench. He nodded. Slow. I spent most of my life building companies no one remembers. And here I am, watching a girl named Tasha rebuild a carburetor with duct tape and a dream, and I can't stop thinking. This might be the most important thing I've ever funded. Amelia gave a small smile. Funny, isn't it? The world teaches us to chase more money, status, reach, but never real. Benjamin leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You've changed me. She raised an eyebrow. I didn't do anything. You did everything. You reminded me what it feels like to be useful. Not powerful. Not rich. Just needed. She looked down at her hands, still stained with grease, and nodded. I know that feeling. I used to think I had to prove myself to be worth something. Be the smartest, fastest, strongest. Now I just show up. He watched her for a moment. You're different, he said. I'm the same, she replied. You just finally saw it. That night, after the last student left and the tools were packed away, Amelia and Benjamin sat on the roof of the hangar, legs dangling over the edge. The stars blinked overhead like old friends, and below. The tarmac stretched into quiet darkness. Benjamin pulled out 2 beers from a cooler and handed her one. "To grease and grit," he said. "To breaking," she added. "And building better." They toasted, clinked bottles gently. "Are you scared?" he asked after a while. "Of what? Of this, whatever this is?" She considered the question. "Yeah, but only because it matters." He nodded slowly. "Same." They sat in silence for a while, sipping slowly. Then Benjamin said something so simple it nearly broke her. "I've never been proud of who I am, until I met you." Amelia stared ahead, blinking against the emotion rising in her chest. She didn't cry, she rarely did, but something inside her cracked in the best way possible. She turned to him, her voice low. "I'm proud of you too." And just like that, the man who once lived behind mirrored glass and headlines became someone softer, fuller, more human, and the woman who was once written off as just a mechanic became a voice people listened to, trusted, followed. Not because she tried to be anyone else, but because she finally stopped trying to be anything but Amelia. It happened on a Thursday. The media had finally caught up. Drones circled the hangar. Headlines screamed across the internet. "Billionaire abandons deal to build community garage. Mystery mechanic becomes face of unlikely partnership. Who is Amelia Brooks?" Cameras waited outside the gates. Reporters shouted questions. Investors called in panic. Benjamin's inbox was flooded. And yet, inside the hangar, it was quiet. Calm. Amelia was teaching Tasha how to listen to a misfiring engine by ear. Benjamin was wiping down a bench, whistling an old tune he didn't even realize he remembered. Until the door opened. Jason Hale! Again, suit, clipboard, tension radiating off him like heat. But this time, he wasn't alone. With him were board members from Langford Industries, the deal Benjamin had walked away from. They wore crisp suits, sharp expressions, and quiet judgments. Men and women who had never touched an engine in their lives. "Benjamin," one of them said stiffly, "we need a word." He glanced at Amelia, who raised an eyebrow. He nodded and followed them outside. The board circled like wolves. Cameras zoomed in. Microphones tilted forward. "This hangar project has become a liability," said one man. "You're risking your legacy," said another. "Who is she to deserve all this?" "Why this place?" "Benjamin." He held up a hand, then spoke not to them, but loud enough for the microphones to catch. "You know what my legacy used to be? Numbers, charts, deals I couldn't remember 6 months later. I built empires and lost sleep over quarterly dips. I forgot what it felt like to fix something that matters." He pointed to the hangar. "That place is more real than anything I've built in the last 10 years. And he turned towards the open door where Amelia now stood. "Watching reminded me how to be something other than a brand." One reporter shouted, "Are you saying you're choosing her over the merger?" Benjamin looked the man in the eye. "I'm saying I'm finally choosing something that makes me feel alive." And with that, he walked back toward the hangar. Cameras flashed, voices clamored, but Benjamin didn't turn back. Inside, Amelia stood with her arms crossed, grease on her jeans, and something between disbelief and admiration in her eyes. "You just blew up your entire PR machine," she said. He smiled. It was never worth the noise. Amelia shook her head, chuckling. "You're insane." "I know," he said, "but I'm not alone anymore." That evening, after the reporters left, after the headlines cooled, Amelia and Benjamin sat on the tailgate of her Jeep, watching the sky turn to molten gold. She took a deep breath. "Do you regret it?" "No," he answered instantly. Not the money, not the fallout, nothing. He turned to her. I regret not doing it sooner. The words hung between them, soft and certain. Then, without ceremony, without pressure, he reached for her hand. Not to pull her closer, not to make a statement, but simply to hold. She didn't flinch. Their fingers interlocked, rough palms and grease-stained knuckles. 2 lives built on sweat and failure and quiet victories. For once, there was no need for words. No declarations, no labels. Just this 2 people who had built something the world could never quantify. Not a product, not a merger, but a place, a purpose, a partnership, and maybe something even deeper than that. Anyone can build a future if they're brave enough to start with what's in their hands. As golden light spilled across the Glenridge airstrip, Amelia Brooks wiped her hands on a rag and looked around the hangar that once held only dust and memories. Now, it held laughter. It held students. It held purpose. She wasn't there to fix engines anymore. She was there to build people. Her next blueprint wasn't for a jet. It was for a program-free mechanical training for underrepresented youth. Kids who'd been told you're not the right fit, you're not qualified, you're not enough. This time, they'd hear something different. Because the girl who once worked in shadows had become the woman building a place where others could shine. And the man who once ruled boardrooms had finally found something worth standing beside. This wasn't the end of Amelia's story. It was just liftoff. Because for her and for every underdog who walks through those hangar doors, the ground was never the goal. It was just where they started. The end. Up next, 2 more stories that will move you. Click to keep watching and hit subscribe if you believe quiet courage changes everything.